A new flashpoint is unfolding in the world's most volatile energy corridor. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says it has seized an oil tanker in the Persian Gulf, carrying millions of liters of fuel and crewed entirely by foreign nationals. Iranian state TV says the IRGC boarded the ship as it was leaving Iran's waters, though authorities have not disclosed its flag or destination. This comes as US-Venezuela maritime tensions rise in the Caribbean, while Iran reports new interdictions in Gulf waters. Analysts say tanker actions are increasingly being viewed through a bigger power politics lens: sanctions, energy, and control at sea. According to Iranian state media, the seized tanker was carrying millions of liters of fuel when it was intercepted. The crew was described as entirely foreign nationals, though Iran has not disclosed their nationalities or the number of crew members detained. This detail is significant. The seizure of foreign nationals raises potential diplomatic complications, depending on which country's citizens are involved. Iran has not released images of the vessel or provided details about where it is being held. The lack of information about the tanker's flag, origin, and destination makes it difficult to assess the full implications of the seizure. Iran frames the seizure as an anti-smuggling operation. Iranian authorities regularly accuse ships in the region of smuggling fuel, citing massive price differences between subsidized fuel inside Iran and international markets. Fuel inside Iran is heavily subsidized, making it far cheaper than on the open market. This creates an incentive for smugglers to buy fuel cheaply in Iran and sell it abroad at market prices. Iranian authorities say the goal is to disrupt fuel smuggling networks in Gulf waters. Some shipping security watchers say the timing will fuel speculation about politics, but the claim can't be independently verified. The Strait of Hormuz remains central to these confrontations. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow waterway, making any disruption a matter of global concern. The strait connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. At its narrowest point, the strait is only about 21 miles wide, with shipping lanes even narrower. Analysts often describe Hormuz as a major pressure point that can amplify Iran's leverage in a standoff. Any conflict or blockade in this area would have immediate and severe consequences for global energy markets. The latest reported seizure follows a string of similar incidents. International reports, including Reuters, say Iran has announced several tanker detentions, including cases tied to alleged fuel smuggling. This pattern suggests either a sustained crackdown on fuel smuggling or a deliberate escalation in response to external pressure. The claims cannot be independently verified. The frequency of reported seizures has put shipping companies on alert. Insurance sources cited by Reuters have said war risk premiums can jump when Gulf tensions spike, pushing some operators to reconsider routes. Each incident adds to the perception that the Persian Gulf is becoming increasingly risky for commercial shipping. But the story does not stop at the Gulf. U.S. officials say they intercepted a shadow fleet tanker tied to sanctioned Venezuelan oil shipments, while Caracas calls it piracy. The seizure was part of a broader U.S. crackdown on what Washington describes as sanctions evasion. U.S. officials frame the crackdown as sanctions enforcement and anti-crime, while Venezuela rejects the accusations and says it's economic warfare. The competing narratives highlight how each side frames its actions as legitimate while calling the other's actions illegal. Tehran has responded sharply to U.S. actions in the Caribbean. Iranian officials have condemned U.S. actions as unlawful and destabilizing. Iran's foreign ministry has warned that continued pressure on Venezuela and other countries could provoke consequences far beyond the region. Iran portrays the dispute as a broader test of sovereignty and international law, a message that can resonate with countries wary of U.S. sanctions. Tehran frames the issue as part of a broader challenge to the global legal order, not simply a bilateral dispute with the United States. An Iranian official condemned the U.S. move as illegal, calling it lawlessness, and urged other countries to take a stand. The official stated that America's repeated actions only make its responsibility heavier each time, and that America must sooner or later be held accountable for its conduct. The language is notably strong, accusing the United States not just of policy disagreement, but of violating international norms. The official called on any country that considers itself responsible for international peace and security to take a clear position regarding U.S. actions. This is a call for other countries to join Iran in criticizing what Tehran views as U.S. overreach. Iranian officials argue that selective enforcement of international law, especially at sea, risks eroding long-standing rules governing navigation, trade, and security. The official stated that U.S. actions in the Caribbean region, which involve intensifying pressure against an independent sovereign member state of the United Nations, are in direct conflict with established international principles and norms. This framing presents U.S. actions not as sanctions enforcement, but as an attempt to intervene in another country's affairs. The official added that these actions signify what Tehran calls a challenge to the principles that have formed the foundation of the international community over the past 8 decades. This is a sweeping claim, suggesting that U.S. actions threaten the post-World War II international order. The United States has offered its own justification for actions against Venezuelan oil shipments. U.S. officials frame the crackdown as sanctions enforcement and anti-crime measures. Washington has pointed to alleged Venezuelan cooperation with designated organizations as reasons for the pressure campaign. This framing presents U.S. actions as legitimate law enforcement, not economic warfare or regime change efforts. Critics argue that the real goal is to pressure the Venezuelan government. U.S. officials reject this characterization. The Iranian official noted what he described as a positive development from Europe. He stated that the fact that some European officials have taken a position regarding this issue could be seen as a promising sign, and that European countries are aware of the danger that American actions pose to the international order based on law. This suggests that at least some European voices have expressed concern about U.S. actions, though the specific officials and statements were not identified. The official added that any indifference or disregard for what Iran views as a violation of law will have severe consequences for all nations and for global peace and security. This is both a warning and an appeal, urging countries to speak out against what Iran views as problematic U.S. actions. Iranian officials argue that U.S. actions set concerning precedents. Tehran's position is that if the United States can seize vessels based on unilateral sanctions, then the rules governing maritime commerce become uncertain. This argument may resonate with countries that rely on freedom of navigation and are concerned about the implications of U.S. maritime enforcement. The question of whether U.S. sanctions have legal force outside U.S. territory is contested. The United States argues that it has the sovereign right to enforce its laws. Critics argue that without UN Security Council authorization, such enforcement lacks international legitimacy. This fundamental disagreement is unlikely to be resolved. But each seizure adds to the tension. As tankers are boarded and shipping lanes scrutinized, energy markets remain on edge. Each seizure adds another layer of uncertainty to already fragile supply chains. Oil prices are sensitive to any perceived threat to supply. Tensions in the Persian Gulf, home to major producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE, can send prices higher even without actual supply disruptions. The combination of U.S. pressure on Venezuela, Iranian tanker seizures, and ongoing regional tensions creates a volatile environment for energy markets. Shipping companies face difficult decisions about routes, insurance, and risk management. Iran has issued a broader warning about its willingness to respond to perceived aggression. The official stated that the Islamic Republic of Iran, in the face of any kind of aggression or encroachment against its national interests, will respond in a manner that it itself determines. This statement is deliberately vague, but it signals that Iran is prepared to take action if it believes its interests are threatened. The phrase, a response of a nature that it itself determines, suggests Iran reserves the right to choose how and where to respond, not necessarily in kind or in the same location. This ambiguity is itself a form of signaling. It creates uncertainty about what actions might provoke an Iranian response. Iran has framed U.S. actions in Latin America in strong terms. The official stated that actions being taken by the United States against Venezuela and certain other countries within the Latin American region constitute what Iran views as a blatant violation of fundamental principles and represent a dangerous recourse to unilateralism. This language reflects Iran's view that U.S. actions are not just wrong, but destabilizing to global stability. Iran's solidarity with Venezuela reflects a broader alignment between countries that view themselves as targets of U.S. pressure. Both Tehran and Caracas are under heavy U.S. sanctions. Both criticize what they view as Washington seeking to intervene in their affairs, and both frame themselves as defenders of sovereignty. Analysts say maritime enforcement actions are increasingly overlapping with geopolitical confrontation. What might once have been treated as routine anti-smuggling operations or sanctions enforcement is now viewed through the lens of great power competition. The United States, Iran, China, Venezuela, and other players are all involved in a complex situation over energy, trade, and influence. Each tanker incident, whether by U.S. forces in the Caribbean or Iranian forces in the Persian Gulf, sends signals beyond the immediate incident. The message is about power, resolve, and the willingness to assert control over maritime spaces. The confrontation over tankers is unlikely to end soon. The United States shows no sign of easing pressure on Venezuela. Washington views sanctions as a key tool for addressing what it sees as threats to regional stability and U.S. interests. Iran shows no sign of changing course. Tehran views U.S. actions as illegitimate and continues to announce seizures in Gulf waters. Venezuela, caught between the two, continues to seek alternative markets for its oil, particularly in China, which has been willing to purchase Venezuelan crude despite U.S. sanctions. The Strait of Hormuz will remain a point of tension. Any escalation there could have immediate global consequences, given the volume of oil that passes through the waterway. Energy markets will continue to price in uncertainty. Each incident, whether a seizure, a statement, or a military maneuver, affects calculations about supply and risk. For shipping companies, the calculus has changed. Routes that were once routine now carry additional risk. Insurance costs can rise quickly, and the possibility of having a vessel stopped by any party is a real consideration. The broader question is whether these incidents remain contained or whether they escalate into something more serious. So far, both sides justify their actions as law enforcement. Washington citing sanctions, Tehran citing anti-smuggling, and each calls the other illegal. This pattern can continue indefinitely, or tensions can rise further. The stakes are high, the players are determined, and global energy flows hang in the balance. For now, another tanker has reportedly been seized, another crew detained, and another layer of tension has been added to an already volatile situation. The confrontation continues.